Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Songwriting Simplified with me, Jonny Lipsham, here at jonnylipshamstudios.co.uk in the southeast part of Scotland. And we all know that Scotland is the capital of every conceivable dimension and every dimension that has not yet been conceived of because we're Scottish. So there it is. Complete domination of everything at a molecular level by Scotland. Anyway, I hope everybody is doing well and has had a great first half of their week. Boy, it seems like hardly longer than yesterday that we were doing Sunday Night Live, which is why sometimes I mix up the two, because sometimes the days go by so fast and I end up just mixing one into the next. It's just like, okay, we just finished Sunday Night Live and now we're on to Songwriting Simplified. So yeah, it can get a little bit like that. And we are flying through 2025. I mean, we are very, very nearly at the end of March and heading into springtime. Although I suppose officially we are in springtime. But yes, it will not be long before we're heading into summer, and I'm most looking forward to that. Indeed, looking forward to that. So, but we got to get through April, and April is always a wet time in Scotland and does not tend to be very warm. But wherever you are in the world may vary. It may be nice and gloriously hot in the springtime for you. I don't know. And if that's the case, I'm jealous. Anyway, it looks like Billy Morgan was first in the door, and then there was a long gap back to second place, which is Dave from Aurora's Boring Alice. And I don't know if Alice is really that boring, but I don't know. I don't know who she is. She might be boring. Dave, you're going to have to tell me if Alice really is boring. And he has a question which we'll get to in just a minute. Just Bob is here as well and also has a question. Kyle Trajuziak is here too. Brett Marla is here. Danny Taylor, Don Oliver, and we have somebody new here. Bedouin Buddha. Buddha. I don't know. Who that is. Yeah, I'm not sure who that is. But anyway, welcome. I'm glad you're here. Just Bob says, def more dimensions if Scotishness is involved. Yes, for sure. And that's mostly because of the whiskey. The whiskey does provide extra dimensions. So if you are the type of person that wants extra dimensions, you got to drink a 12-year-old single malt, either from the mainland of Scotland or from one of the Highlands, one of the islands like Shetland or Tiree or Mull or somewhere like that produces world-class single malt whiskies. And you will definitely have more dimensions than the regular ones. That's for sure. Brett says Denver typically gets the most snow in spring. Okay, that's kind of backwards. But there again, I suppose in Australia, when it's our summer here in the Northern Hemisphere, for them, it's going to be winter. So when it's like July, August, and it's gloriously hot and sunny in Australia, they may well have like below freezing temperatures and they may well have snow. And then at Christmas, they have their turkey on the beach in t-shirt and shorts. So it is the nature of living on a globe, I suppose. Okay, so let's take a look at these questions. And I'm sure if you have a question about songwriting in general, or lyric writing, or melody writing, harmony, chord changes, music theory, arranging, writing for strings, writing for horns, writing for woodwinds, writing backing vocal harmonies. If you've got any questions that are to do with any of those things, then please do get them in the chat, just like Bob and Dave have, where they've started the question with @Jonny Lipsham Studios. If you do that, What that does in the chat is that highlights my name in red, and it makes it way more easy for me to pick out questions from the chat. I'm absolutely cool with you guys talking to each other. It's fine. But if you've got a question, I'm likely to miss it unless you start it with Jonny Lipsham Studios. So please do that. It would make it a lot easier for me. And if you're watching and you are not subscribed, you're not going to be able to ask a question in the chat until you do. So please do hit the subscribe button and that notification bell and select all notifications so you don't miss anything that is coming on this channel, including more Studio One content than you could possibly shake a chicken at, because there is plenty coming this year. This year is going to be very exciting, and it has already been quite actually exciting because we've had 7.0 in October and we've had 7.1, and there's a lot more to come. If you can count upwards, you know that there's more stuff coming. So it's going to be very exciting. All right, so let's get to those questions. And I do believe that Rich Cresswell is here, and Stephen Wilson is here as well. Just Bob is stuck in his garage. Pouring down a heck of a rain, yard is pooling water. Oh, I hope you don't get any flooding there. All right, let's go and see. All right, so let's start with Dave's question. He says, a topic for discussion, perhaps. Click tracks and quantizing. I use a click quite a bit. When I don't hear it, I'm on the beat or on target. However, too much becomes sterile. The concept of quantizing outside of arpeggios to me also becomes sterile. What are your thoughts? And as an aside, which note resolution, 32nds, 16ths, would you quantize to? Those are a string of really great questions, and I'm going to take all three together because they are kind of related questions. They're all related to tempo, to time, and to tidying things up. So let's start with click tracks. Click tracks can either be really, really useful or they can be a pain in the arse. It depends upon what you're used to. If you have never played with a click track or a metronome in your life, then it's going to be hard to adjust to. Whereas on the other hand, if you are used to playing with a click track like I am, I've been playing with click tracks for, like over 40 years, then they're actually really, really useful. However, if I had a choice, if I had a preference between a click track or metronome and something like a loop, percussion loop of some kind, I would go with the percussion loop. Something like a shaker with maybe a cowbell on beat 1. Or something like that. I would prefer that over straight, dunk, 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 which is what most DAWs have, Now, in Studio One, you can change the sounds. You can have the metronome say anything you want, which is very, very useful. You can have the main downbeat say oi, and you can have the rest of the beats, so like beat 1, say oi, and then all the other ones say you. And so you get oi, you, oi, you. You can kind of do whatever you want, and you can load those sounds into the metronome. It's actually really, really cool. I do believe I made a video on that a long, long time ago, so maybe I should do a refresher video so you can see how to add your own sounds to the metronome, because it's very, very cool if you want to customize and personalize the metronome so that it keeps you on time. Now, there are 3 sounds you can use. There's the main accented downbeat, there's the rest of the beats, which is just, that's the second sound, and then the third sound is what they call the offbeat, which would be the subdivision. So if your time signature and tempo are therefore going to be the main pulse is the quarter note, then the offbeats are going to be 8th notes. It doesn't do 16th notes unless you're time signature is eighth notes like 6/8 or 9/8 or 15/8 or 32/8, then your main pulse is going to be eighth notes and your subdivision, your offbeat, is going to be 16th notes. And it does that automatically, right? So you got 3 sounds that you can add into the metronome, and then you can just decide how to balance those up. So you can have a burp for beat 1 and a fart for all the rest of the beats, and then your little upbeats, you can have, I don't know, a pig oink or something else. Whatever helps you keep you in time. And that's what they're there for. They are designed to keep you in time. Now, this is where a metronome can be your best friend, because it can help guide you to being on time. The funny thing about metronomes is, or click tracks, is that when you're actually right on the beat, you don't hear it anymore. And you might be lulled into thinking, is this thing still on? The only way you're going to find out is to either speed up a little or slow down a little, and then you will hear it. And you go, no, it's still there. And then you get back on top of the beat. Which is why if you listen to your favorite records, which have been recorded with a click track, is you might actually hear that the drummer does that just like occasionally. They'll be right on top of the beat, and then you'll hear them slow just a little or speed up just a tiny bit, and then go back because they're checking to make sure the metronome is still there. Because when you're playing right on it, you don't hear it. It cancels itself out. And that's not a bug or a flaw or anything like that. That's just how metronomes work. You can do this with an analog metronomes. You know, one of those ones that actually has like a ticking handle. Even if you play along with one of those and you tap on a snare drum or you tap on your table and you aim to get exactly on top of that beat, you will stop hearing the tick of the metronome because it cancels out. It's an auditory thing, so you cease to hear it anymore. So that's one way in which you can judge whether you're actually in time or not, is, you know, as you're playing to the metronome and then you stop hearing it. More likely is that you are right on the beat and you just keep playing. And then you'll hear it if you start to slow down or pick up a bit, that you'll start to hear the metronome again, and that will help keep you honest. And that's how I play with a metronome. Now, there are a couple of things that you can do with metronomes. You can apply a little bit of mathematics, and this is something that I do when I'm practicing, is, let's say I want my tempo to be 120 beats a minute, but I want the metronome to tick on beats 2 and 4. Well, what I need to do is I need to set that metronome to 60 beats a minute, which is half. And then what I need to do is count a beat before each click. And then the click for me will be on 2 and 4. And so when I'm practicing, I like to have the click on 2 and 4 rather than on all 4 beats. It makes it easier for me to play musically and to play fluently. And it also helps me to apply something that I like to call elastic rhythm. And my mother taught me how to do this. Basically to stretch time like a rubber band and then snap it back into time. Now, if done right, it sounds fantastic. And some of the great singers do that. People like Ella Fitzgerald, Billie Holiday, Sarah Vaughan, they are the completely deserved, I should say. They are the undisputed, that's the word I was looking for, the undisputed mistresses of time, particularly Billie Holiday. Because Billie Holiday could stretch time to such an extent that you'd think that she's never going to make it back, but she always knew where beat 1 was. She always knew where that downbeat was. And that's the secret. Always know where beat 1 is. Have that internalized. So click tracks are very, very useful. However, a lot of artists that I have worked with over the years, they actually prefer like a little percussion track. And you can just program a little 1 or 2 bar percussion loop with a shaker and some claves or something. And then just loop that. Now you've got the loop feature in Studio One 7, you can just drag that thing, or you can just like set your start and end markers and then just right click your little loop and just say loop to end, and it will loop to end, and you don't have to do anything else. And then it's there for the whole song. And then your artist will find it maybe a bit easier to play with. And so people that haven't really played with a metronome or a click track, that's probably going to be the easiest thing for them to use. And you quantize that thing. You make sure it's in time. Which leads me on to the next question, which is to do with quantizing. Dave is actually right. Quantizing, if you overdo it, can make music sound very robotic and sterile, and nobody really wants that. Unless you are working in certain genres, like certain industrial styles. If you're working in industrial music, there are certain styles and subgenres of that music where everything has to be very, very, very quantized to death, practically. Now, for me, that robs the life out of the music. But that would be stylistically correct for industrial styles. And I know drummers that they do their drum tracks and then they quantize them to death. Even if it takes them 2 hours to quantize their drum track, they will quantize that sucker to death. And to me, it sounds very, very robotic and very sterile, but it's exactly what you have to do for that particular genre. So, it's genre dependent, how much you quantize. If you are working just broadly speaking in pop, jazz, R&B, soul, you're not really necessarily... Well, certain R&B styles, actually, you probably will quantize quite a lot because that music tends to be locked to the grid. Jazz, you're not really going to be quantizing much at all. In fact, if I'm working on a jazz tune and I'm working with a jazz singer, I will manually go through the whole song for each track and I will manually slip edit things rather than quantizing. So if I'm dealing with MIDI, if it's a virtual drum set or a virtual bass or something like that, then I will quantize things and then I will humanize them. I will use the humanize feature maybe a couple of times. I'll humanize it once, I'll humanize it again. And then that's good enough for me. It's not overly quantized and it still sounds a little bit nice and loose. And that works really well with other parts that might just be audio, like an acoustic piano, or an electric guitar, or a saxophone, or something like that, which is organic. If the MIDI parts are quantized too much, it can be really hard to get the thing to swing and to breathe. And so if you're working in music which has a lot of kind of freedom rhythmically like jazz does, then quantizing is not really something you want to do. You will want to go through and manually tidy things and make sure that everything feels good and has a sense of swing. Okay, so if you're talking pop or R&B or gospel, you're going to quantize. You're going to do quite a lot of that. But you don't want to overdo it at the same time. So use your ears to help you judge how much you need to quantize. If something is pretty much on beat and feels good, leave it alone. Don't touch it. Leave it alone. Okay, so to Dave's final question about note resolutions. Broadly speaking, and this comes from a lot of MIDI programming over the years. I've been using MIDI and MIDI instruments pretty much since MIDI was invented. So I started recording in MIDI way back in the middle 1980s. So we're talking like 85, 86, maybe 87. So yeah, I've been doing that for a very, very long time. And broadly speaking, I quantize to the shortest note value that I've actually performed. So for the most part, I'm quantizing 16th notes for most styles of music. Unless it's jazz, like I said, I'm not really going to touch it. But if it's like funk or pop or R&B, I'm going to be quantizing to 16th notes for the most part. And occasionally I will select a section which is shorter and I will just select just those notes and I will quantize them to whatever note value was intended. And again, if I'm talking certain styles of music like funk, I want it to be in time, but I don't want it to be too quantized. So again, I might use some humanizing to make it, sit off the grid just a little bit, but be nice and snappy and in time. So the shortest note value that you've played. The thing about quantizing is, and this is what you've got to get your head around. What quantizing does, it's like if you imagine your music is your hair. Now that's hard for me because I don't really have any. But if you imagine that your music is your hair, and you've just got up in the morning, so you have bed hair. And quantizing is like applying a brush to your hair. It moves your hair into place that you want it to be. So what does this mean from the digital standpoint? What this means is it means that it moves everything to the grid, to the nearest grid line. It's important that you get this, to the nearest grid line. Does that mean that that's going to be the grid line that you actually intended when you played it? Not necessarily, because it doesn't know that. The quantizing algorithm doesn't know that. All it knows is to mathematically move things to the nearest grid line. So that might mean that when you quantize something, note placement might not be exactly what you intended, in which case you can just select the note that's a little out of place still and move it to the grid line that you prefer it to be on. Again, that's not a bug. That's just how MIDI works. And that is how MIDI has worked since MIDI began. And you'll find this in every DAW. You'll find this in Cubase. You'll find this in Studio One. You'll find this in Logic. You'll find this in Reaper. You'll find this in Pro Tools. You'll find this in all of them because MIDI is the same thing in all DAWs, which is why that same thing will crop up over and over again. And you've got to get into your head, that's what quantizing does. So that's quantizing when it comes to MIDI. When it comes to audio, it's a little bit different. And this is where it depends upon the DAW. Different DAWs have different audio algorithms. For example, Studio One uses Z-Plane. And it is Z-Plane that allows you to quantize the audio using bend markers and time stretching and compressing the audio. It's Z-Plane that is the algorithm. Other DAWs will have different algorithms, either built in-house or third-party, like Z-Plane is a third-party thing, right? But PreSonus has a license to use it in Studio One. And so that's kind of how that works. And the thing to bear in mind with audio is when you're quantizing audio is if the note is being stretched or compressed, or if it's being shifted quite a lot, and it's being stretched or compressed by quite a lot, you can end up with artifacting. So be careful about how much you use quantizing on audio. But Dave, that is a fantastic subject for discussion and a fantastic question. So thank you very much for that. And we'll get on to Just Bob's now. He says, I recently thought up an idea. Write down one word a day for a month. Place the word in a bowl and then shake up the bowl and pick one at a time to create lyrics. It may not make sense. Could be inspiring. Okay. That's actually a genuine way in which you can write lyrics. Related to that, I would say, and this is something that all of you can do. And in fact, a few years ago, I had this as a songwriting challenge. Not very many people got on board with it, but it's definitely a challenge. So here's what you can do. If you still have user manuals for household products like microwaves, kettles, toasters, air fryers, whatever household products they are, pick a number. And that number is the page number of the user manual that you have selected at random. So you might pick your air fryer manual and you might pick the number 18, okay? That means you can only use words from page 18 of that manual. And then you pick another number, and that number is going to be the paragraph number on that page. So you could say the first number is 18, the second number is 6. So that's paragraph 6 of page 18. Now, if page 18 does not have 6 paragraphs, you just simply pick another number between number 1 and whatever the number of paragraphs there are on page 18. And whatever is in that paragraph, that's your first verse. And then you repeat that, pick another page, pick another paragraph. That is your verse 2. And then your chorus will be free. You can make up your chorus. But your first verse and your second verse are these randomly chosen paragraphs. So that's part 1 of this little concept. Part 2 is to pick a style of music at random. And again, you can apply the kind of little, write them all down onto little pieces of paper, put them in a bowl, shake them up, and then whichever one you pick at random, that's the style of music that your song has to be written in, using those lyrics from your user manual that you've already chosen. And then the trick is you then have to go and make that song. And you have to forget about rhyming, because rhyming is not the name of the game here. The name of the game is to make those words fit into a style of music and make it as close to musical as you can get it. So what's that going to teach you? That's going to teach you how to make words fit and how to make words work in the context of a song. It's a fun little challenge. We actually used to do that. There's a variation of this, which we used to do in drama classes when I was at university. Because one of the elective modules that I chose to do in my second year was acting. And I did acting alongside my music degree for my second year. And so I completed that. And so it was like a whole year of acting. And it was great fun. And so that was one of the things that we had to do as one of the improvisational games that we had to play in drama class. And it was great. And so I would just sit at the piano with this manual and I would just sing whatever it was that was there. And so that's how we made up songs. And it's hilarious fun. And it's a real challenge, and it does teach you quite a bit about making words fit into a song and making it musical. It's a good idea, though. I like it. Kyle says, remember to give Jonny the finger. Click the like button. Thank you, Kyle. And I'm going to give the same right back to you, my friend. So yes, please do hit that like button. We have 19 people watching, and we have 17 likes. So let's try and equal it out, please, guys. Let's get that parity. That would be great. I'd appreciate it. I'm going through to see if there are any more chickens. Chickens? Questions. Sorry, that's Brett saying shaking chickens. What with the price of eggs right now? Exactly. And that's what made me say chickens. Brett says, I typically don't like any accents on my click. It throws me off. Okay, yep, that's a personal preference, and it's perfectly valid. Bob says, I've read that some professional studios use a light as a metronome. To me, that seems like it would be very visually distracting. Completely agree. And whoever came up with that idea, each to their own, but I still think there's something wrong with you. DJ Vu is in the house. Welcome, DJ. I'm glad you're here, my friend. Dwayne says, is steampunk industrial? I'm not really sure. It's not really a genre that I know anything about, I'm afraid. I'm going through the chat. Daryl Harrison is here. Hello, Daryl. Good to see you, my friend. DJ says, my new definition of MIDI is most ideas develop ideas. I think that's actually quite true. I think there is some wisdom there. For sure. Dave says, I find these days is to arrange some songs to poetry as opposed to boring chord changes. You can certainly do that. There's plenty of poetry out there that you can get into. And I actually highly recommend that as another challenge, actually, to challenge yourself with, is find some poetry and try and set that poetry to music. You'll find that the hardest ones to do are the poems that don't really have a set meter. There are poems that have a meter. What do I mean by that? A sense of a tempo or a pulse. And there are others that really don't have a meter at all. So making a non-metered poem into metered music, that's definitely a challenge. But it's worth having a stab at. And if you really want to challenge yourself, try a Shakespeare sonnet in its original Shakespearean language, in its original Shakespearean English. And, setting it to, I don't know, punk or something. Some pretty heavy punk could be quite good for a Shakespeare sonnet, for example. Let's see. Kyle says steampunk can vary from Americana through industrial. Yeah, I have to admit, it's a musical area that I'm not particularly familiar with at all. Just Bob says, how would you approach writing a melody to the Iliad and the Odyssey by Homer? Well, it's interesting you should say that, because actually Steely Dan have already beaten us both to that, because their song Home at Last is actually based on Homer's The Iliad. I think, oh no, it's not the Iliad, it's the Odyssey. It's Homer's The Odyssey. Because I think the Iliad and the Odyssey are two separate works. I think. I could be wrong about that, but I'm fairly confident that they are two separate works. But yeah, Home at Last is a great kind of rhythm and blues, halftime shuffle thing. Bernard Purdy on drums. I think it's Greg Fillinganes on piano. And it is very definitely oh darn it, I've forgotten the bass player's name. He's one of my favorite bass players as well, which is really terrible. But anyway, it's him. Who's pretty much on every Steely Dan record, let's face it. And Dean Parks, Larry Carlton on guitars, with Walter Becker on guitar as well. But it's a great song. And it kind of features this kind of little riff. Basically, it features that kind of idea. It's a great, great song. I used to play it with my band for a lot of years. And I basically turned the horn section. The horn section in that song is not a big horn section. It's mainly just trumpet and tenor sax, I think. There's not like a whole lot of a horn section in it, if memory serves me. Okay, Brett says, suppose you're scoring a mystery film. What scale would you use to suggest a character is suspect? Great question. You can try things like maybe an augmented scale, something like that, or a whole tone scale. Although whole tone scale tends to suggest mystery, you know. It tends to suggest mystery rather than somebody is suspect. But you could certainly emphasize things like the flatted fifth or, you know, augmented fourth, depending upon your outlook on life. You know, this interval here. You know, you could go... you know, something like that might suggest that somebody that has walked into the room might be the bad guy. Or, you know, basically you are suggesting to the audience that they are the bad guy. But you could be also, and I've done this in film scores because I've been asked to, is to basically you want to throw your audience off the scent, especially if it's like a murder mystery film, and you want to throw your audience off the scent. You want to make your audience think that an innocent person is the killer. And so using the tritone, the flatted fifth, the augmented fourth, again, you know, depending upon your outlook on life, whether you're happy or sad, you know, that can be something that's of great value. You can totally throw off your audience. And then when you get to introduce the real bad person, then you can kind of, you can really kind of amp up that, and also odd little phrasings work as well. So things like quintuplets, septuplets, non-tuplets, for example, are really, really useful. And especially if you do things like little bits of metric modulation. So you push that little 5 or 7 or 9 note figure across the bar line, either in 4/4 or in a different time signature like 7/4 or something like that. So maybe you do something like quintuplets in 7/4, but you have it displaced by an 8th note, something like that. And then you're emphasizing. And then also, you know, special effects, you know, sound effects, you know, maybe take something like a flute and run that through a phaser, you know, have this little melody in a flute or something, or I don't know, some other instrument, and run that through a phaser, and then run that phased sound through the rotor plugin, for example, in Studio One, to get it really washed out in a kind of swampy kind of sound. So yeah, so different effects like that can be really, really helpful. So either providing those things musically or musically in combination with, you know, a little bit of sound design, can really go a long way to kind of emphasizing, you know, highlighting a particular character in scene as being the bad person versus the good person. So, you know, if you want to make something, you know, a little bit of contrast. So let's say you're a good guy. You have a good guy, but he's a little bit complicated. So, you know, good guy. might be like a straight major triad, right? But if he's just a little bit complicated, maybe he's a good person, but there's an air of mystery about him. Try this chord here. Which, whilst it does have the tritone, there's a whole 2-octave distance in that tritone. So it's a little bit less obvious. And you got a major 7, and you got the 3rd, and you got the flat 5 there. So this would be like C major 7 flat 5. Be, you know, it can be quite a handy little chord to suggest that somebody is a good person, but there's just an element of mystery about them, you know. So something like that can suggest that somebody is a good person, but they're also, there's a little hint of melancholy about them, or a little bit of sad. And so you can then contrast that with, but this other person in the scene is also the bad person. So, you know, you can totally go through. And then you can totally change the key and change the chord. Let's make it, you know, this interval instead. So this person is bad. You've got that tritone right there. Also rising in whole tones as well, so there's like lots of different things there you can do that kind of like contrast that this person is bad, this person is dark, and then this person is fine, they're good, but they're just a little bit maybe complicated. You have a complicated history maybe. So, yeah, intervals, harmony, all of those things can kind of suggest a different personality. All right, so DJ Viz says, a long time ago, it was thought that music had to be organized, but fortunately many musicians have broken all the rules and introduced great ideas to music. Kind of partly right, and kind of also partly not necessarily true. See, even the music that you think breaks all the rules, you know, think maybe Zappa, for example, and you listen to his music and you go, oh, there's no, you know, he's totally breaking all the rules. There's no rules to what he... Wrong. He has very strict musical rules in his music. You know, there's lots of different things, like there's sudden key changes, there's sudden tempo changes, there's modal interchange that happens, there's different time signatures all over the place. So there's lots of things that are going on, and you'd think, oh, there's no rules to this. There's, you know, there are. He's not just like, you know, throwing stuff onto the page. It's carefully calculated and worked out, particularly some of the songs where there's metric modulation that takes place. That's something that, yes, it does kind of break the rules. If you want to talk about very strict traditional Western classical European tonal rules, then yeah, Zappa's music does defy some of those rules. But his music is still very much grounded in that system. It's still tonal. Even if sometimes it doesn't feel like it. It is still tonal music. It is still based in the major minor tonal system that's been around since equal temperament was first developed, and also a little bit before that. Brett says Stravinsky was one of Zappa's biggest influences. Yes, and Stravinsky was a massive influence on Charlie Parker as well. But here's the thing. Neither of those people, Charlie Parker and Frank Zappa, their music is all tonal. It is all based in the major minor tonal system with consistent form and structure to them. Charlie Parker, his music is based in the same major minor tonal system and in terms of form and structure conforms mostly to either a 12-bar blues or 32-bar AABA form. And Frank Zappa's works, even his extended works, also have that element of AABA form to them. So, there's form and structure, even if it doesn't sound like it. And that's the real trick. Sometimes is making music that is so good and so rehearsed to perfection that when you perform it, it sounds improvised. And that's Zappa's music. He would rehearse his band so relentlessly that they would push past perfection and on into that, that kind of no man's land of, that undiscovered country of music beyond perfection, where it's so tight it sounds improvised. DJ says, I meant Mozart's games where playing black keys was condemned and then it changed dramatically. I'm not really sure what you mean there, because playing black keys is essential to playing Mozart's music. So I'm not really sure what you mean there, because you can't play Mozart without playing black keys, because some of his music is in keys that require them. So playing black keys has never really been condemned in music, so I'm not really sure what you mean, to be honest. Yeah, not really sure. Brett says Zappa thrived on the idea of writing ugly melodies, as he viewed that even the ugly should get some time in the spotlight. Yeah, and by that he broadly meant melodies that were complex. Melodies that sometimes avoided obvious tonal relationships. And this is kind of the Stravinsky influence upon him, because that was certainly one of the things that Stravinsky applied as a rule to his music, and certainly other people like Schoenberg and Webern and Berg that were kind of around in that early 20th century period, kind of just before and just after the First World War, where music was beginning to move into, let's move away from this major minor tonal system. And so people like Schoenberg and Berg and Webern and Stravinsky and people like that began to basically try and stretch this major minor tonal system to a point where, it was what you would call atonal music. But even Schoenberg's most atonal music, his opera Tristan and Isolde, isn't actually non-tonal. It avoids tonal relationships, but it's not atonal. It's still grounded within that major minor framework, but he avoids tonal relationships. What do I mean by a tonal relationship? This one. This is a major third. This is a minor third. This is a second. This is a minor second. This is a fourth. This is a flatted fifth. This is a fifth. This is a minor sixth. This is a sixth. This is a dominant seventh. This is a major seventh. So all of those are tonal relationships. One note as it relates to another in a certain context. So avoiding those How do you do that? It's actually quite tricky, but it's not impossible. And so what people like Schoenberg and Stravinsky basically went on to write actually very, very tonal music that had lots of chromaticism, but based very much in a tonal framework. Schoenberg basically abandoned major and minor and went full in with atonality and building 12-note tone rows. Worth doing a little bit of Googling on 12-note tone rows, because you'll find that though that music just sounds like somebody's just going and playing random notes, it's not. It's based on a very specific set of 12 tones. So the 12-tone note row is composed very carefully so that each note is not related to either the note that follows it or the note before it. It has no tonal relationship to either its next note or its previous note. And it's actually really hard to come up with a 12-tone note row that doesn't have any tonal relationships within it. It's really hard. I had to do it at university for composition. And so we had to come up with this 12-note tone row and create a piece of music. I created a 7-minute piece of music, which I wrote for the university big band. And everyone thought it was a little bit strange that I was writing this, 12-note tone row for a big band. Not really the done thing, but kind of sounded pretty good, actually. It was fun. It was fun to do, but I'll tell you this. After hearing it for maybe the 5th or 6th or 7th time during rehearsals, I needed some Alka-Seltzer for sure. Because it would give you a bit of a headache, for sure. And then, if you listen to somebody like John Coltrane, certainly in his latter years, was reaching for a sound that he could hear in his head but couldn't quite play. It's really interesting to think about where he, would he have actually grasped that sound and made something with it had he not died? If he'd continued to live into his 80s, yeah, that would have been something. But he was straining for sounds that didn't really exist yet. And then you hear somebody like Albert Ayling and Sonny Rollins, one of his contemporaries. Sonny Rollins basically found aspects of that sound, and then people like Michael Brecker found that as well. But what was that sound? Basically notes that are between the cracks on the piano. Notes that are kind of not notes. They're sounds between notes. Harmonic overtones. Things like that. And then, playing outside, what we call playing outside, which is where you actually go out of the key that you're in, and that creates a lot of tension, and then you come back. For example, if we're playing a blues in G, one of the things I have done is I've gone and played almost an entire chorus in A flat, which is like a half step above the key, and then the trick is to make sure you land back and you resolve that tension. So you always land back in G. And it's one of the things that Victor Wooten has talked about, and I've talked about things that he's talked about, where he talks about there being no such thing as a wrong note. And he's right. There isn't. DJ says, for me, Pat Metheny is an example of harmonic musical exploration in guitar playing. Well, if you like Pat Metheny, you'll probably like Kurt Rosenwinkel as well. He is just awesome, amazing, inspiring, and he likes to kind of play in quite a daring and explorative way. Very, very, very hip, very musical though. All right, so go out of doors, go out of key, and then come back. And it's hard to do. It requires quite a bit of practice. Because it can sound pretty horrible if you don't nail coming back. So yeah, it does require quite a bit of practice, but people like Michael Brecker was the master of it. The solo in What's the Frequency, Kenneth by REM is all meandering off-key craziness. It kind of is, but it's not, he's not just like playing any old shit, to use the kind of phrase. He is going out of key, but he's always coming back. And that's the thing that creates the tension. And that's the bit that this is the REM this is the Coltrane influence upon REM. Which is very definitely there. Just Bob says a window shatters sound is considered noise. It still has pitch and levels of tone scale. What makes that different from music? Shattering glass can be musical. Depends upon the context. I mean, if you just chuck a rock through your next door neighbor's window, it'll make a hell of a noise, but what is the context for that noise? And how is that kind of musical? You have to work out what the context is to make that musical. It's not just the fact that the glass banging together off of each other, the bits of glass shards banging into each other, might create certain pitches and certain harmonic overtones. And here's the thing. If you break a piece of glass, like a window, and then you bring that sound into Studio One, and then you slow it down dramatically, you can actually hear the pitches of the individual shards of glass. And it can be very, very interesting. And you can actually make little, like a little loop out of that. So you slow it down dramatically. And by doing so, you're going to lower the pitch. So it's going to sound like it's down here somewhere. And then what you do is once you've got that, you then pitch it up without speeding it up. You just up the pitch, you transpose the pitch, but you keep it slowed down. And then you can almost play it as an instrument. It's quite interesting. Adam Neely did a fantastic video, maybe about 3 or 4 years ago, where he took a kick drum and he sped that up faster and faster and faster and faster until actually it made an actual pitch. And then he made a whole song out of that sound. So, yeah, even a percussive sound like that could potentially have pitch. It's just a case of finding that pitch and then making use of it. Good point, though. All right, we are at the end of the show, folks. Thank you very much for the great questions, the great talking points, and thank you to Dave for the first discussion point that got this show going. This has been a fantastic show, folks. It's been a lot of fun, and we peaked at... What did we peak at? We peaked at 20, which is actually pretty good for a Songwriting Simplified. Thank you very much, everybody, for all of your thoughts, your questions, and your comments. Very, very educational, very, very interesting, and I appreciate all of you guys. That is the end of the show. I will see you all on Sunday for Sunday Night Live. We'll be back here. And the question is, will it be at the same time? It will always be at the same time. If you're in the United States, it is always 6 p.m. Central. But if you're in the UK and Europe, stand by. I'm not sure exactly when the clocks here go forward. I think it's next weekend. I think it's Sunday the 30th. Is what I reckon. That our clocks will have gone forward. In which case, for UK and Europe only, you guys will be affected by that because my show will go back to its regular time. You guys in the United States, don't worry about it. It's always going to be 6 p.m. Central. Whether that's, daylight saving or standard time, whichever it's going to be. But it's always 6 p.m. All right, folks. So I will see you next time on Sunday. Good night, everybody.